Today on Notsam Wrestling, Drew McIntyre quits, comes back, leaves CM Punk a bloody mess. Seth Rollins returns. Uncle Howdy and the Wyatt Sick6 are here, and they're haunting Pat McAfee. Jacon Fatu shows up and joins the Bloodline, and that's just the beginning. I don't know how we cover it all, but we will. This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling after a week that when you really think about it, and I think people started thinking about it like as we were watching Smackdown this week, and it was just story hit, story hit, story hit, story hit. I think we all started to really come to this realization that between everything going on in the pro wrestling world over the last 7 days, it was one of the most eventful in terms of sheer number of stories that I recall, certainly in recent memory. And I don't know how, I'm gonna try to talk about all the big stories, and I am getting word from our network sponsors and partners that they are allowing us to continue. They're going to stick with us for as long as it takes here on Notsam Wrestling. So here we go. I mark this the beginning of the pro wrestling summer. So many stories, so many launching points, all these different points. It was like all these missiles being fired from every single direction, some of them intertwining, by the way. You never know with these stories which ones are hitting against which other ones. But there are so many things that were launched in the last week that I would say that the SummerSlam predictions that we made last week, you could throw them in the garbage. Because I have no idea where we'll be in 6 weeks by August 1st. I don't even really know where we'll be at Money in the Bank. We'll talk about some of the Money in the Bank participants in a minute. But let's start with As Our Bloodline Turns, another Bloodline story and something that you know I love to cover on Notsam Wrestling. We cut an emergency podcast about it immediately after SmackDown on Friday. But let's get into it. Jacon Fatu is here. Jacon Fatu was the name that people were waiting for. When you realized the Bloodline was expanding, Jacon Fatu was the first name that came up. When Tama Tonga made his debut on SmackDown the night, or the Friday, I should say, after WrestleMania, that was the spot that people were waiting for Jacon Fatu in. When Tonga Loa came in, that was the spot that people were waiting for Jacon Fatu in. Now that Jacon Fatu comes in, I feel like a lot of people were waiting for Hikuleo to show up, and here comes Jacon Fatu. No matter what you want to say about the Bloodline, they still keep us guessing. And Jacon Fatu. So this week, and I talk about all these stories intertwining and intermingling to the point where everything is making everything else all the more interesting. And there's no better example of that than what we saw with the Bloodline. You know, when it was announced that CM Punk was going to be in Chicago, right? We watched CM Punk go to Scotland to ruin Drew McIntyre's life. And then CM Punk goes, the next time you'll see me is in Chicago. It didn't take Einstein to have the thought that, oh, maybe Chicago is the place that Drew McIntyre will ruin CM Punk's life. Ruin a man's life in his hometown the way he ruined yours. Well, we'll talk about Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. But that's what we were expecting, I think, when CM Punk came to the ring. That he would cut his promo, and at some point Drew McIntyre would come out, even though he quit on Raw, come out of the crowd or something, attack CM Punk, give him a beat down, and put a nice bow at the end of segment 1 on SmackDown. But instead, we got anything but a nice, tidy bow. Because as CM Punk was talking to the crowd in Chicago, and he was talking about everything that had happened between him and Drew McIntyre, we hear those words. Those 3 words that can only mean one name. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Heyman interrupting a CM Punk promo, and immediately you can hear the audience. Immediately you can read social media. The moment is not lost on anyone. If there is anybody associated with Paul Heyman, it is CM Punk. The story of CM Punk is so, I'm going to go back to that word, intertwined with Paul Heyman. You know, all the rumor was that in the beginning of CM Punk's career, the reason that he could never get past a certain point, the reason that he could never get put in that spot, that he could only get so successful before somebody pushed him back to the bottom of the card, was that he was a Paul Heyman guy. And in that era of WWE, Paul Heyman had a reputation for politicking for the people that he believed in. And I say politicking in the most positive way, but pushing backstage for the people that he believed in so vehemently that it would get to the point where people would, out of spite, not put them in positions to succeed. And that was what the sort of the vibe on CM Punk was. And when CM Punk finally got to this place where he reached that precipice, where he reached the potential that all of us CM Punk fans knew that he was going to be able to reach, Paul Heyman was there by his side. When he was a villain, Paul Heyman was there. When he went into WrestleMania 29 and faced The Undertaker in The Undertaker's last successful defense of his WrestleMania streak, it was Paul Heyman that was by CM Punk's side. And we know, watching the Hall of Fame, how close they are. That Paul Heyman described CM Punk as his best friend, that looking out in the front row at the Hall of Fame, Paul Heyman was looking at his children and at CM Punk. And most of the time, the Hall of Fame is a night that we take off. The Hall of Fame is not canon. The Hall of Fame is doesn't count towards the story. But you forgot rule number 3. Everything counts. So when Paul Heyman is walking to the ring, he is complimentary of CM Punk. I mean, he does it in the most genius of ways. This is what separates Paul Heyman from everybody else. That every message gets across. Everything that is on the brain of the Paul Heyman character gets across. He walks out and he's complimentary towards CM Punk. So we realize the reverence that he has for CM Punk. But in the same breath, he mentions his tribal chief and he puts those prayer hands up and he looks to the sky. When the fans are chanting, "We want Roman," after he brings up Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman immediately has that forlorn look of wanting his tribal chief to be back. So in this moment, we understand that Paul Heyman, in a very real way, has a great affinity and affection for CM Punk, but he is still the wise man to his tribal chief. But he gets in and he brings up the Hall of Fame. That's why I say everything counts. He brings up the Hall of Fame. He doesn't insult our intelligence, right? He doesn't come out and go like, people may not know, but we're very close. He goes, everybody that's watching SmackDown was potentially watching the Hall of Fame. I am not going to come out on SmackDown and say, hey, I'm with the Bloodline and we don't like you, CM Punk. I'm going to acknowledge what we all watch together because we are all intelligent human beings that have the power to process the information that is presented in front of our very eyes. But he says that he's here on a mission. He says that they're there in Chicago, and that the only thing hotter than the weather is CM Punk starting SmackDown, huh? What a rub. What a rub to CM Punk. But he has a request for CM Punk. He would like CM Punk to do something. CM Punk needs to acknowledge the current standing tribal chief, Solo Sikoa. He says that they were driving to the arena in Chicago, listening to sports radio, and on the radio they said that Chicago was CM Punk's town. And he said that really upset Solo Sikoa. Again, all these steps where it's like Solo Sikoa could come out and just say, hey, this isn't your show, this is my show. But instead we tell this backstory where there's a reality to it, where wrestling exists outside of the 2 hours of television that we're watching on. Where instead of it being like, hey, WWE exists from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Friday. It's like, no, Solo got annoyed because on the way in, the DJ on the sports channel said that Chicago was Punk's town. Did that happen? I don't know, but it's believable. It's conceivable. So he goes, I need you to do this for me, and then I have a favor to ask of you. Punk is looking at him, and he says, I need you to leave. Acknowledge and leave, right? And then I need you to do me a favor, right? So that's when Solo and the Tongans come out. and they let CM Punk know that either Punk acknowledges Solo, or Solo and the Tongans are going to make sure that CM Punk never gets cleared. And CM Punk looks at Paul Heyman. He says, "What was the favor that you were going to ask of me?" And Paul Heyman, with nothing left, just looks at CM Punk and says, "Take me with you." And you're like, oh my God, he's going to he's got one friend left. Please help me, Punk. Help me. You're my only hope. Like he's Princess Leia talking to R2-D2. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. Help me, CM Punk. You're my only hope. And CM Punk puts his finger in the air and he goes, I acknowledge that I'm looking at a fake-ass bloodline. Oh, he calls him a fake-ass cosplay bloodline. And he goes, okay, fine, we're getting in there. And Solo and the Tongans, they approach the ring to all three of them, take out CM Punk, and Paul Heyman is quivering in the corner. He leaves the ring, and that's when Cody Rhodes runs through the crowd. And he's got a baseball bat. And now Cody Rhodes and CM Punk with their bats are staring down the bloodline, and the bloodline knows better than to get in the ring. So they don't get in the ring. And Cody Rhodes says, Solo Sikoa, later tonight, me and you, one-on-one. I'll tell Kevin Owens and Randy Orton to stay away. You tell the Tongans to stay away. I've already beaten one tribal chief. I'm going to beat another one. Whoa! Them's fighting words. Okay? So before this match, we go through, we watch Smackdown and everything. And before the match happens, we see Solo Sikoa and Paul Heyman backstage. And Solo Sikoa's already tell Paul Heyman, when I tell you to do something, you just do it. And before they go out, he says, Solo, Paul Heyman says, Solo, you are going against the orders of the tribal chief, Solo. He says, before Roman got on that plane, before Roman got on that jet, leaving Philadelphia after WrestleMania, the rules that he dictated were, number one, as a favor to me because he knows that CM Punk is like family to me. He agreed that CM Punk would have no hands put on him. And number two, he said to put Cody in check, not checkmate. He said put Cody in check so that Cody is ready and waiting as soon as Roman gets back. And Solo Sikoa looks at Paul Heyman, and Solo says, Paul, I'm telling you this because I love you. Roman's not coming back. And Paul Heyman, who we looked at as this puppeteer, this person who always had control, this person who's always in charge, all of a sudden becomes this quivering, confused man who's just pacing around after Solo Sikoa leaves going, how can that be? How can that be? This is the mental torture that the bloodline has always been associated with. When you watch any cult documentary on Netflix, any of them, and what they do is they separate people from their families, and then they lie to the people about the families so that they can control those people. Solo Sikoa has been given the information that Roman Reigns is not talking to Paul Heyman. So what is Solo Sikoa going to do? He's going to take that isolated Paul Heyman, and whether this information is true or not, he's going to use it to manipulate the biggest brain in all of wrestling, to manipulate and control the wise man. Because while Paul Heyman at one point was saying everything will be okay, we'll fix this when Roman gets back, he's now been told the separation is permanent. Welcome to your new reality. And that's when Paul Heyman is going to have to click into survival mode. Solo Sikoa is doing everything that he can to kill the hope that this is temporary and that Roman Reigns will be back. And while Solo Sikoa is getting Paul Heyman into his corner and making sure that Paul Heyman realizes that if you want to survive, this is the new reality forever, he goes to the ring to face Cody Rhodes. Corey Graves on commentary says that, the affiliates are going to run with this match as long as it takes. However, they did not need extra time because, to nobody's surprise, the Tongans end up coming out, regardless of whether Solo said they would or they wouldn't. Cody challenged him to it. The Tongans end up coming out. Presumably, they've taken out Kevin Owens and Randy Orton, but they have not, because once the Tongans are out, Kevin Owens and Randy Orton come out. And Kevin Owens and Randy Orton and Cody, they get Solo Sikoa in a position where they need him to be. They take out Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, and now the three are cornering Solo Sikoa. And Solo Sikoa feigns vulnerability as he backs into the corner before he smiles. And that's when Jacon Fatu comes out. Now, I went over all my feelings about Jacon Fatu coming out on this bonus podcast that I put out on Friday night, which you can check out. But it couldn't have been a better debut for somebody. There's an immediate separation between Jacon Fatu and everybody else associated with this new bloodline. Number one, he's blood. He's a Fatu. He is Solo Sikoa's blood cousin. It isn't like, oh, now how are they related? Well, he and them. It's like, nope, it's right down the family tree. But number two, within an instant, Jacon Fatu, by himself, alone, as one person, took out the entire top-tier good guy scene of SmackDown. So Jacon Fatu alone took out Kevin Owens, Randy Orton, and Cody Rhodes, to the point that Cody Rhodes was on live events over the weekend claiming broken ribs from the attack by Jacon Fatu. Taking out Kevin Owens, then taking out Randy Orton. Cody got a couple of good shots in, but not enough, because Jacon Fatu would drag him to the outside, put him on that table, and have that massive flying leap from the corner of the ring all the way to the table on the outside. So not only do you see, first of all, just the aesthetic, right? You look at Jacon Fatu and immediately you're like, oh my God, he's here. Graves and Barrett are on commentary, going nuts, perfect. You see that he's capable of taking out all three of these superstars at the same time. And then you see this magnificent feat, this big splash from the corner to the table. So you get a hint of what he's capable of if you've never seen a Jacon Fatu match. And right there is how you create an incredible first appearance. You also have people on Twitter who have worked with him before. You had from multiple companies. You had Brody King in AEW, who was tweeting about how amazing Jacon Fatu is. You had Karrion Kross from Monday Night Raw, who's tweeting about how he's worked with with and against Jacon Fatu over the last 10 years. And that everybody on SmackDown is in big, big trouble. There's this question. Because here's the thing about Jacon Fatu. Not only does he fit the bloodline, not only is he the name. There's other Fatu. There's Zilla Fatu, who's the son of Umaga. There's Lance Anoa'i, who's out there. Of course, as we brought up at the beginning of the show, Hikuleo, who's the third brother of Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. These people are all still out there. But ultimately, Jacon Fatu is that name. Jacon Fatu is the name that stops the conversation about whether this is a fake bloodline or not. Because you can call the bloodline bootleg all you want. Nobody's calling Jacon Fatu a fake. Nobody. It's not going to happen. You're going to see this guy once. Watch what he does and go, oh, yeah, Jacon Fatu fits into any bloodline. 2.0, 1.0, whatever you need. He's there. Jacon Fatu is that name. The question was, how does Solo Sikoa and the bloodline, if Roman Reigns comes back and he's a good guy and everybody's cheering for him, then obviously he's going to come to blows. Everybody's been throwing this word civil war. I guess it's 2 words around when it comes to the bloodline. But in order for that to be effective, you need 2 sides that are equals. And the question was, when you have Roman Reigns and potentially the Usos on one side of this thing, how does Solo Sikoa's bloodline get built up to be a threat big enough that the original bloodline has something to compete with, that the original bloodline is actually looking at it going, I don't know if I can do it. God bless Solo Sikoa, but when it comes to Roman Reigns versus Solo Sikoa, it's a Roman Reigns show all over the place. Roman Reigns versus Jacon Fatu? That's a different deal. That's a much different story to tell. Jacon Fatu versus Roman Reigns is compelling. The idea of Jacon Fatu joining this new bloodline and the old bloodline kind of having to put all their trouble aside and figure out how to work together to stop this force now that they've Jacon Fatu, that is interesting. But at the same time, this new bloodline, there are complications here. Solo Sikoa is clearly running this thing, if what we see is to be believed, is clearly running this thing in a manner that he's not necessarily communicative. Because if you watch the end of Smackdown, both of the Tongans were looking on confused at what was going on with Jacon Fatu. Both Tongaloa and Tama Tonga were looking at Jacon Fatu joining Solo Sikoa like neither one of them realized this was happening, but we better put our ones up right now and be on the winning team, okay? Where have you seen that dynamic before? When the tribal chief has decided that this is his enforcer, this is his number 2, and the rest of you need to just line up. And you're not going to be communicated with. We're not going to talk to you about this. I'm just going to do things the way I see fit. I mean, pretty firmly already. You've got Tongaloa and Tama Tonga in that position that Jimmy and Jey Uso were in. You've got Solo Sikoa in the Roman Reigns position. And now you've got Jacon Fatu in the Solo Sikoa position. It's a mirror image of what we saw a couple years ago. And where did that lead us? It led us to Solo Sikoa being this version of Solo Sikoa. So if history repeats itself, what do we think is going to happen here with Jacon Fatu? It's pretty great. It's pretty great. The message was sent clear. Our top guys cannot stop this Jacon Fatu. You ain't calling this guy a fake bloodline. And he was the Samoan werewolf before. He's the Samoan werewolf here. Jacon Fatu, the only change in Jacon Fatu from the guy we saw in SmackDown to the guy we saw tearing things up in MLW, in Impact, every place else that he's been, all over the world. The only difference is that he appears to be in the best shape of his life all of a sudden. He looked like $1 million. Other than that, exact same presentation. Corey Graves called him a werewolf on commentary, and he's got a big werewolf in the style of that Samoan artwork on his t-shirt that they're already selling on WWE Shop. So I think we got the Samoan werewolf in the bloodline in WWE on SmackDown. And that wasn't, there's a conversation between what was a bigger deal. Jacon Fatu joining the bloodline and taking the bloodline 2.0 to the next level, or the fact that after all these QR codes, after all the threats, after all the confusion as to what exactly is this, Uncle Howdy and the group that we now know as the Wyatt Sick6 finally showed up. Now, again, we had an emergency podcast the day after Monday Night Raw that went up, kind of going over in painstaking detail everything that happened in the debut and really just the feelings. Because the emergency podcast, when it comes to Notsam Wrestling, is all about the feelings. Now, what's the follow-up? First of all, in a nutshell, this Wyatt Sick6, which, again, if you go to WWE Shop and you look at that merchandise, it looks like it's spelled SICK number 6. I didn't think that was it at first, but it looks like it is. There was a lot of questions as far as identity. 2 sets of identities. Number 1, who were the bodies that got massacred at the end of Monday Night Raw? Now, my thinking was that these were all extras except for Chad Gable. It appears that that was true. There were people thinking that Gunther was there and not Walter. Gunther is Walter. That Gunther was there and Braun Strowman was there and Carmelo Hayes was there. Maybe Triple H was there, but all of these people have been accounted for. Carmelo Hayes was on SmackDown in a Money in the Bank qualifier. Braun Strowman tweeted out that he wasn't even around because he was chasing the Judgment Day out of the building. Who else? Gunther hasn't tweeted anything, but it wasn't Gunther, okay? Triple H has been tweeting. And I'm assuming was running SmackDown. Look, to me, it was like you're not going to show a close-up of one superstar and make it real clear this is the guy you think it is and have everybody else buried in smoke. Because I think a key that we've got to all these stories is that they're intertwining with each other, but ultimately they're their own stories. And you're not going to allow one big story to take away from another big story, right? That CM Punk is the catalyst to tell this bloodline story that you're going to tell through SmackDown. But ultimately, they're going to go their separate ways afterwards. That's why there was no sort of communication about CM Punk being a part of the main event, because CM Punk's story just became a device for the bloodline story to kind of connect with it and then disconnect once again. And I don't think as amazing as the Uncle Howdy debut segment was, you can't make it a part of every single story that happens, because otherwise you've got Uncle Howdy taking over the entire company. And then at that point, instead of having all these amazing stories, you've got the one that I hope works out. So I'm thinking, and I think a lot of people are thinking, that family has to be the issue with this Uncle Howdy group, right? And again, going to the second set of identities, I said there were two sets of identities that people question. Number one, the victims. Number two, of course, the group members, which I think it's pretty clear. You've got Uncle Howdy, portrayed by Bo Dallas. You've got the Sister Abigail character, portrayed by Nikki Cross. You've got the Huskus character, portrayed by Joe Gacy. The Mercy the Buzzard character, portrayed by Loomis, Dexter Loomis. And then, who am I missing? You're probably listening or watching this right now screaming. But who's the other puppet, right? You got Loomis, Gacy, Cross. I mean, who's the hell's the other character? I'm apologizing for blanking on it right now. I think I've just got all these thoughts in my head right now about everything that's going on the show. Oh, of course. And of course, Ramblin' Rabbit, portrayed by Eric Rowan, one of the most important members of the group because of his history with the Wyatt family. So one question, I think, is, are the identities part of the characters? Meaning, are we sitting here and telling you, yeah, that's Eric Rowan, who's now got this rabbit mask on, and Eric Rowan's history is XYZ. Yeah, that's Dexter Loomis, who's got this buzzard mask on, and Dexter Loomis's history is X, Y, and Z. Because you could say that all this "you forgot about us" stuff, right, is that Joe Gacy came in. He said two things, right? First, it was the safe space guy. Then it evolved into Schism. But as soon as Ava became the NXT general manager and the grizzled young vets handed in their release, the Schism thing kind of went away. And Joe Gacy was just kind of floundering, being a guy who likes to pick fights with people and doesn't really have a huge purpose, just a crazy guy who screams. You have Dexter Loomis, who came in as this, like, serial killer stalker character who had his thing with The Miz and then just kind of disappeared. Nikki Cross, who was the superhero, and then just somebody who stares off into the distance and then goes away. Eric Rowan, of course, literally, released from the WWE, had his singles run carrying around a spider puppet and then went away. So it's like you could have the characters connected to who these athletes were at one point or not. And I don't know. We'll get to the bottom of that as we go. I think that when you look at their mission, it's a family mission, right? That they're a family. They're based on the thing that came from a family, the Wyatt family. They're former members of, in Eric Rowan's case, the Wyatt family. And Chad Gable said, and Alpha Academy said, and I remember picking up on this as it was happening. Not that I knew it was going to have anything to do with Howdy, but I was like, clearly this is something going on. First of all, the fact that there was a Ramblin' Rabbit puppet in Chad Gable's locker as this promo was happening is that sort of foreshadowing. But they kept for like 2 weeks now, maybe more. They keep talking about how Alpha Academy is a family and you stick by your family. You don't do this to family. You blah, blah, blah. So if that is what set off Uncle Howdy, it's possible. Now, we know things are setting off Uncle Howdy, and we'll talk about all of it. But when it comes to other potential victims, you know, people are talking about it. We're not talking about it like it's happening inside a vacuum. Braun Strowman tweeted out about missing the end of Raw because he was over here, but I'm glad I missed it. Sami Zayn said that he left early, so he didn't see it. He said this in an interview, but based on what I saw, I'm glad I left early, he said. Jey Uso on a digital exclusive after Raw, having just won that Money in the Bank qualifier, which we'll talk about, he goes, because that was one of the questions, right? Will the Fireflies, and I think especially when you realized that the Wyatt Sick6 were clearly going to debut on that episode of Raw, but we hadn't seen them. And Jey Uso is in this match now. The thought, at least that occurred to me, was maybe they're going to attack Jey Uso, and it could be related to the fact that Jey Uso is kind of taken ownership of the Fireflies. And from the very beginning, he took ownership by saying this was a tribute to Bray and how much he loved Bray. But then the question was, well, if this group is based on Bray, are they going to attack Jey for taking the Fireflies, even though he's not part of the family? And Jey Uso, in a promo after Raw, he goes, look, it's all love. And I will never not love Bray Wyatt and the relationship that Bray and I had. But I saw what they did. And if they want the Fireflies back, they can have them. It's all good. It's all love. Because he said he does not want the smoke. And I get it. I wouldn't either. Because we saw what happened with Chad Gable, who got the smoke. And there was a theory on the internet that Chad Gable had been, well, murdered. That people wondered if Chad Gable was alive, to the point that as they saw Chad Gable with that horrible wound in his head at the end of Monday Night Raw, that what did they do? They went on the internet and I think out of a respect and a reverence, they did Chad the ultimate favor of updating his Wikipedia page and put that as a death date. They did say that Chad had been, murdered by the Wyatt Sick6. And as it turned out, he had not. The WWE did not officially announce that at any point. But then he was advertised as of Monday night. He was advertised as being in a triple threat Money in the Bank qualifier with Braun Strowman and Big Bronson Reed. Midweek, they switched that. They said because of what happened, Chad Gable won't be in the qualifier, and instead it'll be Ilya Dragunov in that triple threat match with Braun Strowman and Big Bronson Reed. And then as of the weekend, Adam Pearce jumped in and said, as a matter of fact, Chad Gable has been cleared. He will be able to wrestle, and he will still be in that Money in the Bank triple threat qualifier. However, when Adam Pearce sent out that video announcing that Gable was cleared and he was going to be good to go, the video had Uncle Howdy haunts in it. The Twitter video that he put up had Uncle Howdy things in it. And I go, oh my God, stay away, stay away. Adam Pearce's Twitter account all week was posting weird stuff. Repeated tweets. Pictures of Adam Pearce when he played Postman Pearce inside the Firefly Funhouse. They're finding all the connective tissue, everything that connects people to that Bray Wyatt universe. And maybe they're mad. I don't know. All we can do is interpret. I'm scared because they're attacking everybody. You know? Maybe they're mad that Adam Pearce is not claiming ownership of his connection to the Bray Wyatt universe. Maybe that's why Jey Uso is okay. Because Jey Uso is claiming that ownership, owning it, and shouting it for all to hear. Those lights on those phones are in tribute to Bray Wyatt. Those are Bray's lights, and I do that because I love that man. And maybe the Wyatt Sick6 go, okay, no beef. I don't know if the Wyatt Sick6 are the type of group to say no beef, but maybe they are. I don't know them well enough, and I'm not going to assume any knowledge because I'm scared of them. I see what they do, okay? Maybe Adam Pearce not acknowledging Postman Pearce. You know, not acknowledging his part in the Wyatt family and the history of it and the Firefly Funhouse. Maybe that's upsetting them. I don't know. Does Chad Gable have history with the Wyatt? I don't know. I mean, we find out that Chad Gable is alive by doing this. And then Chad Gable tweets out a picture from, I believe, Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason lives, because Jason dies in Part 4. And then Part 5 is like a whodunit. It's a terrible movie. Don't watch it. But Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason lives, is when Jason is resurrected and he steps out of his grave. And Chad Gable posted a picture of Jason Voorhees stepping out of his grave, which is good for Chad Gable. But I don't think I'd be joking around on the internet if I was Chad Gable. It doesn't seem like the Wyatt Six, and maybe they do, maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like the Wyatt Six have a great sense of humor. It doesn't seem like the Wyatt Six like to be made fun of, like people to make jokes about what they're doing, okay? Because we know that Chad Gable is confirmed alive. I can't say the same thing about Pat McAfee. I don't know if he's alive. I don't know if he's been, if he needs an exorcist. I don't know if he's been possessed. Maybe Adam Pearce has been possessed. I don't know how Pat McAfee is doing, okay? Because he makes jokes. And sometimes it's not right to make jokes. Certain people will tell you that. So on Thursday, on the Pat McAfee show, he's interviewing this Navy SEAL that he's had on the show before. It's fun time for everybody. And at the end of the show, Pat McAfee and Boston Connor and everybody, all my as the Lord of the Marks, all my subjects, they all look off into the distance. And Pat McAfee says, "What the F is that?" But he said, "What the F word?" And then the lights just go out and it goes to black. But most importantly, you hear the Wyatt sound. Boom, boom. That's the sound that is made every time Bray Wyatt, the Wyatt Six, any of them shut down the power by section. That sound was heard. And people are going, oh my God. Could this be Uncle Howdy shutting down Pat McAfee's show? Did the Wyatt Six go into Pat McAfee's studio in Indianapolis, Indiana, and attack the whole crew? Well, we have no idea of knowing. And I go, well, luckily it's Thursday. Pat's on 5 days a week. What's he going to say on Friday? Friday, they come on the air. And as it turns out, it was a ruse. It was a bit. It was fun. Pat and the boys having a good time. They were doing a bit as they've done before with their Navy SEAL guest, where they made where a drone came in and threatened with an electronic weapon to shut down the whole show, and the Navy SEAL had to stop it from doing that. But they used that Wyatt sound effect when they did it. And I think they used that Wyatt sound effect to try to get a little rub-ski off of everything that had been happening with the Wyatt Six. And the Wyatt Six don't like that. They don't like to be turned into a joke. Because then on Friday, when we thought this was all water under the bridge, everything's fine, they're closing the show again and literally saying goodbye. Pat is he's doing his niceties, telling everybody to, I appreciate you, be nice to each other. And before he can say goodbye, we get the white noise, the static. It doesn't go to black. We get the static. And then the blue screen comes up. And in those old school letters, it just says, you lied. And then it statics again, and then it goes out. Done. Show's over. That's not a fun bit, okay? That's not Foxy in the back. Okay, that feels very Wyatt Six to me. And Pat's going to have to show. If I'm Pat, I'm using my sick days. If I'm Pat McAfee, I'm using my Monday Night Raw sick days. They will understand. Except here's the problem. Raw is in Indianapolis. So they'll go to his house. This is bad news. I don't know why Pat McAfee is messing around with this witchcraft. I wouldn't do it. I would not. And I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call it that. I apologize myself. I'm worried about Pat McAfee is the only thing. It said you lied. And that's not good for Pat. So we'll see what happens to Pat McAfee. I mean, I'm not optimistic. But the question was, how are they going to continue on with this? How does this get incorporated? Some people were wondering, is the Wyatt Six going to go into SmackDown? You know, how do you now? I thought that they did such a wonderful thing on Raw. We'll talk about the Drew McIntyre stuff, but they did such a wonderful thing by having Drew in his anger when he quit the WWE. He went into gorilla position and he quit to Triple H's face. Now, what that did was in real time showed you this is gorilla position and gorilla position is still standing. So that way, an hour, 90 minutes, whatever it was later, when the Wyatt Six destroyed gorilla position, we had full context for how much they had done in a relatively short amount of time. And from a storyline perspective, that's amazing to see that the Wyatt Six just decided to destroy everything real quick. But from a real life perspective, it's amazing to see what the WWE production crew is really capable of, because they pulled that off in a single shot like nothing I've ever seen before. And then when it came to because you have to, how do you acknowledge the fact that at the end of your show, this group just came and massacred a whole bunch of people and wrecked your entire space? Well, it was almost like how when a corporation, when something bad happens, and they'll acknowledge it, but they don't want to dwell on it. They're hoping if they move on, people will just kind of forget about it. That's kind of the vibe that I had with SmackDown. WWE was acting like this, and again, we're talking storyline-wise, but WWE was almost like, okay, we know that happened. We'll show you what happened. But we're just going to move on. We're going to move on. Don't worry about that. But if you look, and I thought this was such a great, and even in the recap footage of Uncle Howdy on SmackDown, it was shot and presented in the Uncle Howdy way, right? In the glitchy sort of VHS way, which is cool. But I thought what I really liked was the fact that, and it was acknowledged by Paul Heyman at the top of SmackDown, but every shot you could see commentary had security guards. Every backstage shot that was in a public area, security guards. Everywhere you went all night long, security guards. And it wasn't like, oh, this is building up to something that's going to capitalize at the end of the show. It was just, yeah, there should be security guards. What would WWE do if there was a group that just decided to destroy their show? They would put security guards everywhere. So even though we didn't have a Wyatt Six segment happening on SmackDown or planned for SmackDown, there was still this acknowledgement that it happened, and an acknowledgement that lasted the entire show, not just a recap package, but, okay, the Wyatt Six destroying that whole area should affect everything that WWE does. And it did. Now there's security everywhere. I will say that the feedback that I read on this was most people were like, yeah, that was great. And it'd be tough to argue that it wasn't an incredibly well done segment. For some people, that type of thing is just not their cup of tea, and I don't begrudge that at all. If everybody is allowed their own taste, this is 31 flavors, all different flavors of ice cream. And if that's not your taste, that's fine. If you don't like whatever, that's fine. I love horror movies. I love professional wrestling. I love when you really get some good horror movie stuff going on in professional wrestling. And it hasn't really been done on a high level outside of this Wyatt stuff in a long-term way, which is fantastic. I love it. I love everything about it, and I've never hidden that fact. I love everything about everything that Bray did. I'm a fan. What I don't like is the amount of people who are like almost begrudgingly admitting that it was good, and then forcing the question, yeah, but it just depends on what happens next. It's all about what happens next. It's not all about what happens next. If somebody is telling you that the Wyatt Six debut is all about what happens next, you're not dealing with a person who likes enjoying good things, because it's not all about what happens next. Most of it is about what happened in that moment, because that moment is never going to be taken away. The moment that closed Monday Night Raw, when the Wyatt Six first showed up, is never going to be taken away. So whether you like what they do or don't like what they do going forward, that's never going to be taken away. So this idea that all that matters is what happens next is not true. And to follow that up, this idea in the last year, how often does what happens next not work out? Like this thing where we did something that works, and I won't just allow faith that the next thing will work too, it's a pessimistic way to watch the show, and I will never understand that. If I just come to you with something that's a bad idea, and you go, it feels like that's a bad idea, or if WWE were to just announce, hey, we're going to start doing this, and that feels like a bad idea, it's okay to call a bad idea a bad idea. But when something is done well, and then you take that and go, but I think step one was really good. I think step two will be bad. Why do you think step two will be bad? Because the people that are saying, I think step two will be bad, probably thought step one would be bad. And since it wasn't, now they're going, okay, well, the next one will be bad. You should never be invested. That's like being somebody like in the stock market that only buys shorts, that just bets on companies losing. Okay, you can make some money doing that. Doesn't seem like a very fun life, right? I just like to focus on the losers. All right, I guess that's your thing. That's where you and I are going to part ways. But if you're coming to me and you're saying, yeah, well, we'll see what they're going to do next, as opposed to, I can't wait to see what they're going to do next, those are two very separate ways of thinking. And I am very much on one side of it. But that's just where I stand. And I stand that way because you can look at, they've earned the benefit of the doubt. You can look at what, especially WWE, but wrestling as a whole, like what's been going on and how the tide keeps rising and the ships keep going higher and higher and higher and higher. And it's great as a fan. We're all fans. We get to enjoy this all together. I mean, a lot of that people were saying the same thing about CM Punk. Oh yeah, CM Punk is here now. Oh great, of course he's going to get a big pop when he debuts at Survivor Series. Talk to me in a couple months. Well, look, he started Survivor Series, right? We're closing in on June. So I've got December, January, February, March, April, May, and June. We're closing in on 7 months of CM Punk in the WWE. And I would argue that CM Punk today is even more interesting than CM Punk when he first showed up at Survivor Series. And that includes the fact that a catastrophe happened. CM Punk being injured in his first televised match at the Royal Rumble can only be described as catastrophic. It caused everyone to rethink what they were going to do with one of the biggest superstars in the industry and a huge investment that's been put in this person. It made them rethink everything about what was being advertised as the biggest show in the history of wrestling. And still, WrestleMania 40 ended up as one of the best WrestleManias ever. And CM Punk is in the middle of one of the most interesting stories on television when we've got a television show that is full of interesting stories. So if you were sitting there going, okay, CM Punk's getting a big pop for coming out at Survivor Series, but we'll see. 6 months from now, we'll see. I just don't think people care. Well, clearly that wasn't the case. So if it wasn't true then, maybe we can shift our way of thinking. Now, if WWE gets to a place where they are hot-shotting things and not paying things off, I have no problem with that. If they haven't earned the benefit of the doubt, don't give it to them. But if they have, what can you do? And when you talk about CM Punk, he is in the middle of a rivalry that is, I believe, even more interesting than people thought it would be. And we were all married to the idea of CM Punk versus Seth Rollins. Now, there's nothing that I want to see more than Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk. So on Monday night, Drew McIntyre comes out after losing at Clash at the Castle. Talked about this in the reaction pod to that with Megan Morant and everything. After losing at Clash at the Castle, he comes out halfway through the show, and he's in the ring cutting his promo, and people are chanting at him, CM Punk, CM Punk, and they're booing him. He just lost. For the second time, got screwed at Clash at the Castle. This time it was even closer to where he's from. It was in Scotland. And he told everybody he was doing it for his wife. He told everybody he couldn't lose. He told everybody this, and he lost. So he comes out on Raw, and he goes, CM Punk. And they're booing. They're chanting CM Punk. And he's hesitating. He's pacing. And he goes, CM Punk. And they're booing again. And then that's when he says, I can't do this anymore. Screw this company. I quit. That moment, I felt, shades of Bret Hart, 1997. After returning to the WWE, things were not going his way because another rebel named Stone Cold Steve Austin was getting all of the attention. You could compare this. You could compare very much what's going on with Drew and Punk to what happened with Bret and Steve Austin, where Drew is in the Bret Hart position and Punk is in the Steve Austin position. Now, Punk is not this up-and-comer. It's totally different roles, but the idea that Drew has a moral issue with what CM Punk is doing, and he's looking at the company that he works for, and the company is siding with CM Punk. Because, so I like so there's a for sure comparison there. Drew and Punk, Bret and Austin. And much like Bret had enough, and he acknowledged, Bret was one of the first to really acknowledge Vince McMahon as the owner of the company as he was sitting there on the commentary table. Drew is walking backstage, and he goes into Gorilla, and he calls Triple H Paul, and he goes, no, I'm done. I'm done. And he's yelling at Paul, at Triple H. Paul Triple H Levesque. And then he exits, and I love the little details. Because usually, when backstage scenes are shot, first of all, up until recently, they didn't go into Gorilla at all. You remember they would shoot in the hall, they would stop at the curtain that leads to Gorilla, and then they would pick up again at the entryway. They would never show Gorilla. Now, it's a full part of the production, and I think it benefits greatly. I think people are fascinated. People have heard about Gorilla position for so long. I think people are absolutely fascinated as to what goes in there, who's sitting at what desk. Us wrestling fans love details. And here's the other detail about that Drew McIntyre quit walk-off segment. They made it look even better and more realistic because they didn't clear the hallway. Usually, you watch these backstage shots, and the hallway's been cleared. You might have a couple of extras sitting around, but if there is active talent, it's because they're doing something in the background, meaning if you see active talent, it's because we're planting the seeds of Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio. Or if you see active talent, it's because Sonya Deville is talking to Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark, or whatever it is. But it's purposefully. Other than that, they clear the hallways. In this instance, the hallway wasn't cleared at all. It wasn't cleared, and it wasn't lit. It wasn't lit to shoot, which is this tiny little detail that I thought was excellent. But you could see like Jey Uso in the background. You could see guys warming up. Like it was not prepared for a shoot. And it made it feel like this was a shoot, brother. No, it just made it feel good. I thought it was a good detail that they added in. We're back in the everything counts situation because Drew, it's not just like Drew is saying, I'm really mad that CM Punk interfered in my match in Glasgow, and so I quit. That's not the only thing that Drew's mad about. Drew is mad in a way that we would be mad if we felt that we were being undervalued and mistreated at work. Drew is not just mad because CM Punk showed up in Scotland. You would almost expect that CM Punk would show up in Scotland. Drew is mad at the same stuff that Wade Barrett was mad when he was doing the post show. Drew is mad that after what happened to him, after he got screwed, instead of having sympathy or empathy or some kind of acknowledgement that what happened should not have happened, Triple H, Paul, as Drew called him, went into the press conference and said, we are so happy that Phil Brooks is here. We are so happy that CM Punk is here. He said this was the CM Punk that I've been waiting for. This was the CM Punk I wanted then. I love this CM Punk. Paraphrase. And Drew's like, what? after what he did to me? And then Michael Cole's on commentary. How exciting is it? CM Punk's going to be back on Smackdown. Everybody watch Smackdown on Friday because CM Punk is there. He's the best. Michael Cole, the same Michael Cole that's been calling Drew McIntyre a hypocrite every week on Monday Night Raw, is like hyping up that CM Punk is back. So Drew McIntyre's looking around. He's like, you got commentary putting over CM Punk. You have Paul Levesque talking about how CM Punk is the greatest employee that there's ever been. And I'm getting screwed and nobody's helping me. I'm out. It's all part of why he left. So then this announcement gets made. CM Punk said it at the press conference. I'm hoping that I'm going to get cleared. I'm not going to be at Raw on Monday because I'm going home to see my doctor. But I will be at Raw in Chicago on SmackDown in Chicago on Friday. And he shows up to SmackDown and they have the bloodline interaction that we talked about at the beginning of the show. But first, CM Punk talks about Drew McIntyre, and he does something that's very ironic. He goes, Drew McIntyre, or he says Solo Sikoa is going to jump me in Chicago. Solo Sikoa is going to attack me in Chicago. Meanwhile, Punk just attacked Drew McIntyre in Scotland. So Punk can screw Drew McIntyre in his hometown, but Punk can't be screwed with in Punk's hometown. Very interesting irony there, which again, to me, is one of those little details. So Drew gets mentioned at the beginning of this promo with Punk gloating about what he had done and talking about how everybody loves him for it and getting Chicago to cheer him for it and doing the whole thing. But then we move on to the Bloodline stuff. Then we move on to the Cody stuff. We never hear if Punk is cleared or not, and we just kind of go away. SmackDown continues on. We get a couple matches here. We get a couple angles there. And then Kayla Braxton, who is leaving the WWE, we find out on social media. I can't wait to see what Kayla Braxton is going to do next. Kayla Braxton is interviewing Grayson Waller, and here comes DIY. So Grayson Waller and DIY are having this argument, and they're standing in front of the garage door to the loading dock of the Allstate Arena. And we just hear thud, thud, thud against that loading dock garage door. And everybody, they're like, I don't know what that was, but they're still arguing. And so somebody opens the door. And the first thing we see is CM Punk laid out on the ground, a bloody mess. And then because Chicago is an hour before East Coast time, it's not almost 9 o'clock in Chicago. It's only, 7:50. So the sun is still out, and it's lighting from behind. And you see this amazing backlit, almost shadowy figure. You see these legs for the boots and the legs, and they're standing in front of this downed, bloodied, beaten, and battered CM Punk. And as the door opens, more of the body is exposed. And even with that backlight, even through the shadows, we can see that Drew McIntyre is standing over CM Punk. Apparently his employee pass still works. Drew McIntyre hoists CM Punk on his back and walks him, again, in a single shot. Whoever's idea it was to use a steady cam and single shots, it's much more difficult to do, but man, is it engaging as a viewer to watch. So it just immediately you're locked into it. It is so awesome. And you also just see everything going on. And that's the vibe of WWE right now. So much happening all at once. And so Drew McIntyre walks all the way out to the arena floor and drops CM Punk right there on the entryway. And a stretcher comes to take CM Punk away, but not before Drew McIntyre can take the bracelet off of CM Punk's wrist. Now that bracelet, you could see in the opening segment, and some people on the internet did a zoom in of it. That bracelet was one of those beaded bracelets, and it said, I believe, his wife's name and his dog's name, two of the most important beings that a man can have in his life, his wife and his dog. Those are the two people that'll have your back no matter what, and the dog's not even a person. Drew McIntyre took that bracelet off his wrist, put it in his pocket, cursed out Nick Aldis, and let them take CM Punk away. And as they took CM Punk and his Jordan 1s away on that stretcher, Drew turned his social media back on. That's how you knew it was serious. When he quit the WWE on Monday, he turned off his Twitter, he turned off his Instagram, all the things that gave birth to this version of Drew McIntyre, to this character that Drew McIntyre is right now. It was given birth to via social media, and he shut it all down. But it came right back up when he laid out CM Punk. And Punk asked for this. Punk took it there. But what's interesting about all of this, what's interesting about the CM Punk Drew McIntyre confrontation on SmackDown, as good as it wasn't going to happen if Drew McIntyre had won the World Heavyweight Championship. If Drew McIntyre had won the World Heavyweight Championship at Clash at the Castle, they could have had a confrontation. Drew could have beaten down CM Punk, whatever. But if Drew McIntyre had won the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at Clash at the Castle, he would have no motivation to go that extra mile and to beat CM Punk absolutely bloody and leave him in a heap to the point that we don't know if he's okay or not. We don't know if he's cleared. We don't know if he was cleared or if he's still cleared. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that a lot of people, because when it first happened, people weren't thrilled. There were a lot of people that weren't thrilled that Drew McIntyre had not won at Clash at the Castle, that Drew McIntyre had lost the title match. They thought he was going to leave the champion. And I didn't like it, but then some people, I didn't like that people said this. I didn't mind that he lost. I didn't like that people said, well, that feud doesn't need the title. Because it's an oversimplification. It's not, you haven't really thought about that. No feud needs a title. A title can add to or subtract, whatever. But there was this thing that they said, well, the reason Drew didn't win is because his story with CM Punk doesn't need the title. Okay, but that's a very sort of not well thought out. I mean, it's a very base level understanding. Because the truth is, it's not that Punk versus Drew doesn't need the world title. The truth is that Punk versus Drew needs to not have the world title. That not having the world title is what took this rivalry from a 7 to a 9. And we could do this at a 7, and that would be fine. But making this a 9, making this an ultimate grudge match, making this a match that people are clamoring for, that no matter what you've got going on with the World Heavyweight title, with the WWE Undisputed Championship, with the Bloodline, with Uncle Howdy, with all this going on, still, when you finally announce that Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk one-on-one is going to happen, the reason that you could argue that without any bells or whistles, that's the main event, is because it's not for the world title. And if it was for the world title, I don't think you could argue that it would be the main event, ironically. And it's rare that that happens. But CM Punk costing Drew McIntyre the world title took things too far. And it led to Drew McIntyre taking things even farther. So now we're at the point of no return. If Drew McIntyre is the World Heavyweight Champion, Drew versus CM Punk is a wrestling feud. If CM Punk cost Drew McIntyre the world title at Clash at the Castle, it's a blood feud. And that's what we've got with Drew and CM Punk, and that's why we're completely locked in. And that's why, as all this is happening, and by the way, I know we will get to emails, we'll get to everything today. As all this is happening, by the way, Seth freaking Rollins returns to the WWE. An amazing, when you know all this is going on, you know you've got all this stuff happening with Drew, you know you've got the Uncle Howdy debut. We knew this going into Monday Night Raw last week. And still the show starts with Burn It Down. Oh, And Seth Rollins comes back. The dirtiest of dirt sheets were not reporting that Seth Rollins was going to be on Monday Night Raw, that Seth Rollins was being looked at as possibly main eventing Money in the Bank. And yet, somehow, here we are. Seth Rollins comes out on Monday Night Raw looking like $1 million. Looks like he's been doing all the right things, shopping at all the right places. Beautiful white suit, not a speck on it. Gold chained accents throughout all of it. Just Seth looking as only Seth can do. Comes out and he makes it very, very clear immediately. He doesn't, and it's because it's interesting. We will get back because Seth, yes, when Seth lost, he had just lost the World Heavyweight Championship. But ultimately, when Seth left at WrestleMania, the last thing we got out of him was, I would argue, the most impactful spot on night 1 and night 2 of WrestleMania 40 combined. And that was Seth Rollins coming out in his full Shield gear, acting as the literal human shield to Cody Rhodes, as he had promised to do, and allowing Cody Rhodes to get that moment to beat Roman Reigns and to finish his story. Seth Rollins, to me, is Mr. WrestleMania 40. And that's a story that will be told, but that's not the story we're telling right now. The story that we're telling right now is that Seth is back to claim the title that he says he made. That Seth identifies himself with and as the World Heavyweight Champion and championship. And in the middle of his and he said, and he looks up and he goes, that's why I'm back. And he says he wants to be in the Money in the Bank ladder match, which already I'm like, that would be super fun. The idea that Seth, 10 years removed, right? Because he cashed in at WrestleMania 31, WrestleMania push play. So 10 years removed from winning the Money in the Bank and the heist of the century and the best cash in there's ever been. Seth re-enters the Money in the Bank ladder match. That's exciting. But before we can get there, here comes El Campeon. Damian Priest comes out, and Damian Priest welcomes Seth back and says, legitimately, legit, it's good to see you back. You look great. I mean, the babyface dust is now being dropped in handfuls. If you don't think Damian Priest is a good guy by the time we get to SummerSlam, I don't know what show you're watching. Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest are going to come back on the same page. And that's Damian Priest as a hero. I do not think that Dominic Mysterio, that Finn Balor, that JD McDonough will be on that page. And I think those are the roads that you're going to go down. But ultimately, this world title reign is turning Damian Priest into a good guy. And I think that becomes the power of this World Heavyweight Championship, that it is truly the working man's title. And if you are a real working man's champion, you can't be a villain. It's impossible. So Priest says, and again, dropping the babyface dust by the handful, that he really wanted to cash in on Seth. And he says that with all due respect, but because he wanted to be able to win the title from the person that he associated this championship with, which is, again, very insulting to Drew McIntyre. You think Drew McIntyre isn't getting insulted enough? He needs more on his plate now? That's not cool at all, Priest. So, while they're exchanging pleasantries, Seth says, the difference between, he says there's a lot of similarities, right? That they both cashed in at these big WrestleMania moments, that they both were a part of very impactful factions. He said the only difference is that at one point, Seth grew a set. And everybody goes, whoa. Seth said that there was a point that I met Deez. And Damian Priest said, Deez who? And Rollins said, Deez nuts, which being from New York, Damian Priest should have gotten. This is all paraphrase. I don't know if it actually happened. But He said Damian Priest needs to grow a set. He said Damian Priest should be getting away from the Judgment Day and posed the question, what type of champion do you want to be? And I feel like that was a little bit manipulative. He suckered Damian Priest into this spot of saying, forget about the ladder match, one-on-one. You can just have a shot. Which, if I was Damian Priest, I'm not handing out shots like that. But it worked. Seth's questioning of Damian Priest's legacy lures Damian Priest into this false sense of needing to prove himself. And now Seth Rollins versus Damian Priest is your World Heavyweight title match for the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, which is a huge World Heavyweight title match. And I'll tell you right now what I hope happens. I think that this is the match that serves to solidify who Damian Priest is. As I said, I don't think Damian Priest is a villain anymore. I don't think this world title reign is about Damian Priest being a villain. I think that Damian Priest is a babyface and is coming out of this a babyface. But to get there, I think he needs that definitive, clear moment, that crowning moment that he really hasn't had, right? He went to WrestleMania and he had his moment, but ultimately it was a cash-in that CM Punk helped with. He beat Jey Uso at Backlash, but ultimately the Judgment Day were involved in that match. He beat Drew McIntyre at Clash at the Castle, but ultimately CM Punk was involved in that match. So Damian Priest hasn't had that sort of like, yeah, I'm the man moment. And you could have Seth Rollins beat Damian Priest, and then SummerSlam is Seth Rollins versus Gunther. Seth Rollins versus Gunther is not a World Heavyweight title match that I will ever sneeze at. However, I think that Seth Rollins could stand to get beat. And I understand he just got beat at WrestleMania, right? He got beat by Drew. He did not win the tag match, and he acted as a human shield. But I think when you look at WrestleMania, Seth Rollins comes out victoriously. Number one, night one, he didn't take the pinfall. Cody did. And he fought his ass off. Night two, Drew McIntyre won. But the story of that match was that Seth had already wrestled on night one in Cody's defense. He had also had this title reign that had left him beaten, bruised, in no condition. And then, at the end of that night, acted as Cody's shield. I think that Seth left WrestleMania ultimately a victor. That in the eyes of fans, Seth Rollins was way more the man leaving WrestleMania than even he was going in. So with that said, I think one more sacrifice can be made. I think if you want to solidify Damian Priest as a potential top-tier babyface, he needs to be able to beat people on his own. And I think at Money in the Bank, he should give Seth exactly what Seth asked for. I think that this should be the moment that Damian Priest does something that nobody thinks that he's going to do. I think Damian Priest should beat Seth Rollins clean, in the middle, one-on-one, no interference. That on that night, Damian Priest was the better man. I would like to see Gunther win the title at SummerSlam. I would like to see Gunther beat Damian Priest for that title at SummerSlam. But what I would like is for Damian Priest, because after Damian Priest beats Seth Rollins clean, he's a confirmed babyface. Like, you're just cheering for the guy. There's no heel left. So now you're going into SummerSlam, and it's a Damian Priest who not only is a confirmed babyface, but he's completely on the rise. This beating Seth Rollins should now be a pattern. Now he beats everybody. But what does Gunther do? He ruins stuff like that. He ruins everybody's good time. Let Gunther ruin that for people. Right? We're seeing the rise of Damian Priest. Let Gunther ruin the rise of Damian Priest. And then coming off of that, Gunther's the world champion. Damian Priest can get victories over other people. Seth Rollins can get victories over other people. And then if Jey Uso wins the Money in the Bank within a year, Jey Uso's the one guy that can finally beat Gunther. Gunther's beat him twice, don't forget. Intercontinental title and King of the Ring qualifier. If Jey Uso can cash in, first of all, you keep Gunther a heel because people love Gunther. But if he ruins the ascent of Damian Priest, you keep him a heel. You've now solidified Damian Priest and Seth Rollins as baby faces. Seth Rollins can shake Damian Priest's hand and said, you did it. And then eventually Jey Uso can slay the beast, like we always wanted to see him do with Roman Reigns. To me, the way to benefit the most people, in my mind anyway, is Damian Priest beats Seth Rollins, Gunther beats Damian Priest. That is what I want to see coming out of SummerSlam. But you know what? I've made a lot of predictions about a lot of things, and every week it changes because every week there's something else happening. We talked about how impactful Raw was. We talked about how impactful SmackDown was. Well, there was a video that on Twitter got well over 100,000 likes, and at the last time I checked, this video had over 17 million views on Twitter alone. Say his name and he'll appear. I believe in Joe Hendry. That song hit so many new eardrums this week. It is undeniable that this is the thing people are talking about. I feel like if you can go back far enough, Bobby Roode's theme song was a moment in time. People really clicking and the rise of LA Knight was a moment in time. Joe Hendry is having himself one of those moments. If you looked during the Paul Heyman CM Punk exchange, as Paul Heyman was coming to the ring, there was a sign in the crowd that said, I believe in Joe Hendry. So Joe Hendry, he made a promise and he fulfilled it. His name kept being said. He appeared on NXT. The question about the partnership between NXT and TNA, well, it keeps going because Cody Rhodes, a couple weeks ago on NXT, he said there would be a 25-man battle royal. The winner would get the next opportunity at Heat Wave for the NXT Championship against Trick Williams. And that battle royal would have names from many different locker rooms, not just NXT, he said. Raw, SmackDown, maybe. TNA, maybe. So what we got from TNA, we got Joe Hendry and Frankie Kazarian, which is pretty cool. But Joe Hendry got a full entrance. Joe Hendry got a promo. Joe Hendry got a spotlight. And there were only 3 entrances. We got an entrance to start the show from Javon Evans, who would eventually win the Battle Royal. I believe Ethan Page got an entrance, and Joe Hendry got an entrance. Now, Joe Hendry went in there and got eliminated first. Everybody just teamed up and eliminated him. And, you know, it was almost like a Santino type thing. And people were like, what the heck is that? This guy shouldn't be doing comedy stuff. The difference is he got an entrance. He got a promo. He got to tell the world who had not seen him. By the way, NXT did crazy ratings this week. NXT did what, like 750,000 views this week? That's way more ratings than NXT has gotten before. And I mean, you know, it's whatever. I don't even want to tell you how many more people were watching that than watch TNA Impact. And that's with no disrespect to TNA Impact because they put on a great show. But this character, and you could see it in Joe Hendry's eyes. This is his bread and butter. This character work. This is something that Joe Hendry has built over years. He did it in the Indies. He did it in the UK. He did it in Ring of Honor, and he's done it most recently in TNA. He writes songs. He writes parody songs. The entrance, it's so catchy. It's just you kind of get it instantly. But there's no doubt in my mind that there are bigger things to come. Like Joe Hendry is posting stuff on Twitter. Like, he made a reference to Heat Wave and stuff like that. You also have to keep in mind that when it comes to Twitter and wrestlers using Twitter, sometimes AEW, TNA, NXT, WWE will go, hey, can you tweet this so we can tease it? Other times, and I think most times, wrestlers are business people. And they're like, hey, let me tweet about this and get people talking. And if enough people are talking, maybe they'll want to do it. So both of those things happen, but it's still worth noting when it happens. But what was obviously something that everybody was on board with was after the Battle Royal, Joe Hendry came backstage and he confronted Shawn Michaels. And he said, that you got all 24 of those people to eliminate me. Well, I'll be back. And I think Joe Hendry will be back. I think there was probably already a plan to bring him back. But the fact that there's 17 million people watching that video on Twitter, the fact that everybody's talking about it, what did they say about Austin 316? What did it say when Vince McMahon, not that this is Austin 316, but when Vince McMahon said, you're cursing on TV, you can't be doing this stuff. He sees Austin 316 or signs are in the crowd. He goes, we better get Steve Austin on TV tonight. Joe Hendry signs are in the crowd. What do you think's going to happen? I think we have not yet seen the last of Joe Hendry in NXT. It'll just be a question of what do you use him for, right? Because I think they made the right call by not having him win the Battle Royal. I think we already had a new guy who's not a team. He is an NXT guy, but it is his first match. Ethan Page getting the world title match at Battleground. And then from TNA, Jordan Grace getting the women's championship match. At some point, you have to tell stories. And that's great, by the way. It wasn't a mistake. Both of those things got the world talking, and that's what you want. But you also want what NXT has been very good at, which is building stars. A couple of years ago, they started NXT 2.0, and nobody knew who anybody was, and people got real mad about the show. But what did they do over those 2 years? They took their time, and they built, and they built, and they built, to the point that Carmelo Hayes is a star, and Trick Williams is a star, and Roxanne Perez is a star. And all these people going down the list are stars. Braun Breaker is ready to take over the entire main roster. Star, 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 star. And that's because time is being taken to build these stars. I think they realize, look, Javon Evans is something. The young OG is something confirmed. So let's spend some time building this guy, right? Let's have him have some matches. And by the way, he doesn't have to win every time. He lost to Shawn Spears, but he gets that back by winning this Battle Royal. And do I think he's going to beat Trick Williams? No, I do not think he's going to beat Trick Williams, but I think he'll get over without going over, as they say. I think that he'll end up in a scenario where people are like, oh my God, this guy's got more upside than I remember seeing in a very long time. And that's where it'll benefit him. But I think Joe Hendry will have a spot, which if you put Joe Hendry in there, it's like, yeah, it's an amazing thing to see. But nobody in NXT is actually being raised up by that match. It's just the promotion is, and there are eyeballs on the product, which is always good. But I think both things need to happen in NXT. You know what I mean? And both things are happening, which is good. But I do think Joe Hendry will have something to do. Noam Dar would be a good opponent for Joe Hendry. I think they could be very entertaining, seeing what Noam Dar and Joe Hendry do together. Now, Heat Wave is coming right up, right? I mean, because it's what, July 8th? 7th? Something like that. It's that first week of July. It's the week of July 4th. So it's coming right up. So they'll have to do something if it's going to happen at Heat Wave. And I think it should. I think Joe Hendry should invade NXT this week. I think strike while the iron's hot and have Joe Hendry show up on NXT TV this week and keep things going. Attack somebody and start telling a story that gets Joe Hendry on Heat Wave, because there's only benefit, and it's not just going to, people aren't just going to sit there and wait for it. Strike while the iron's hot. Do it now. Let's get Joe Hendry on NXT TV this week. One more time. Speaking of ratings and wrestling TV, the opposite happened to AEW Dynamite. Of course, it had the world talking. AEW Dynamite's ratings were far lower than average, and that compared with NXT having higher than average ratings was not a great look. And people who enjoy dunking on wrestling promotions enjoy dunking on AEW. I do think that it was low enough that it was hopefully it's an outlier, not something that's what the new trend is. I mean, I felt like Dynamite should have been higher than where it was before this. So the fact that it went down that low, hopefully it kicks up again next week. I mean, I do think that there is good stuff. Like, I'll tell you what was good on Dynamite this week. Will Ospreay and Swerve face-to-face. Go on AEW's YouTube channel and go to that 10-minute segment because it will sell you on the match, right? So many mentioned. First of all, just the idea of like you immediately differentiated the two of them. Swerve immediately told a story when he said, you've been making your mark on the world via pro wrestling, and I've been making my mark on the world via wrestling and in the entertainment world. And Swerve told this story of basically having his heart broken by wrestling, and therefore he has no loyalty to the business, which is a risky way to do things because Swerve's kind of a babyface and people love him, but I guess ultimately Ospreay's the babyface, right? So I don't know. But people can sympathize with it too. But it explained too, Swerve's had the dark circles that he puts under his eyes. This version of Swerve has those dark circles, and he took his glasses off. He said, look what wrestling did to me. And it's like, oh, there it is. That's the explanation. This thing that started in the rivalry with Hangman Page has now unfolded and resulted in this character that we see in front of our face. And he's saying, I do all this entertainment stuff because wrestling's not loyal. Because what happens if I break your leg, Ospreay? Will these people have your back? What happens if I break your arm? Will they still be chanting your name? Because you could do that to me and I'll go podcast. I'll go perform music. I'll do whatever. I got a lot of talents. Which is interesting. Ospreay hits him back with a good one-liner, right? He lists all the people that he was competing with last year alone. And he goes, well, you had hit row, I had a hit list, and I beat all of them. And now they're face-to-face. They're face-to-face. And Swerve starts planting the seeds. You need Don Callis to fight for you. You need the family to fight for you. Similar to what Seth Rollins was doing with Damian Priest. But in this case, I think it was more like well, I mean, it was similar. In the sense that I think you are planting seeds for what I believe will eventually be Ospreay just getting rid of them altogether. I don't know why it's taken this long, quite honestly, to have Ospreay getting rid of it altogether. And then Swerve saying Will Ospreay's son's name, and Ospreay putting the mic down and says, "Don't make this personal." And then Swerve, as Ospreay's leaving, says, "What if I want to make it personal?" And now it is personal. And now they're face-to-face. And now Swerve is saying, I'll put you in the ground, And there was a reference in the promo to Ospreay not using the Storm Driver 91, which is the move that he said that he retired because of the risk of injury, right? That's after they did the angle where Bryan Danielson got injured from it. Look, I think that this is great. I think that what I would like to see happen, because the Forbidden Door pay-per-view, I think, is on Sunday already. So we're right here, and we're ready for it. What I would like to see happen here is that Swerve hands Ospreay a rare defeat, and I think his only defeat in AEW. That Swerve is able to beat Will Ospreay. And the reason he's able to beat Will Ospreay is because he made it personal. He's in Ospreay's head. And maybe there's a point when Don Callis comes out and Ospreay sends him away, and that's a distraction. A million things could happen. But ultimately, Swerve's singular focus is what wins this match for him. And now Will Ospreay has to find his way back. I don't know when the Owen Hart tournament, maybe it's already, is it too late for Ospreay to join the Owen Hart tournament? I don't know when it actually starts, right? Because I think it's starting in Calgary, right? Let's see. The Owen Hart Cup, the tournament 2024. Go down to 2024. So there's a wild card entrant against Jeff Jarrett, which I would like that to be Will Ospreay. I don't know when that match is happening, but if it's happening after Forbidden Door, I'd like that to be Will Ospreay. Because I want Swerve to beat Will Ospreay and to continue on. And for Will Ospreay to realize he's got to fix some things. And I want Will Ospreay to finally be able to beat Swerve after winning the Owen Cup in Wembley. Because that's what they said. The winner of this tournament faces Swerve in Wembley. And right now, Pac has advanced over Claudio. You've got Shingo Takagi versus Bryan Danielson. That's happening at Forbidden Door. You've got Rey Fenix against Jay White. And you got Jeff Jarrett versus a wild card entrant. And by the way, if you want to see something spectacular, look up Jeff Jarrett's promo about why he's in the Owen Hart tournament. But yeah, because to me, Wembley, like unless it's Pac, I don't know that I want to see Swerve versus anybody besides Will Ospreay at Wembley. And I think eventually you want to get to Ospreay versus MJF. But I would far prefer that Ospreay versus MJF is a world title feud. You know? It should be. So I think if timing works out, and I don't want to, if the timing doesn't work out, I don't even want to say it, but I think Ospreay should win the tournament by beating Jeff Jarrett in the first round and then going all the way. And then eventually he goes to Wembley and he beats Swerve with the Storm Driver 91. He finally brings it back and he beats Swerve with that Storm Driver 91. That's the way I would do it. Now going to Forbidden Door, and I don't know what the contract status is, but do we see Ricochet? Like at the end of that Will Ospreay Swerve match, does Ricochet come out and present himself as the next opponent to Swerve? Is Ricochet going to join the Owen Hart tournament and be that wild card? And Ricochet faces Swerve in Wembley. I wouldn't mind Ricochet versus Swerve in Wembley, I guess. You could do Ricochet versus Swerve in Wembley for the title and then MJF versus Ospreay, I guess. But I don't know. I would not, if the contract is up, because there's not going to be a non-compete because Ricochet's contract is just running out. I just don't know when it actually runs out. But that would be a good spot because of his history with Swerve and Ospreay, regardless of what happens. The end of Forbidden Door would be a good spot to see Ricochet. There were also a lot of fun rumors about Shane McMahon and whether he would ever sign with AEW. Now, I believe that there's never been any official conversations. Tony Khan has said that they have never talked about it. But if there was ever a time when Shane McMahon, if there was ever an era for Shane McMahon to sign with AEW, now is when it would happen. There's literally nothing that can happen in wrestling right now that you can look at me and say, that can never happen. Nothing. We got some Money in the Bank qualifiers on Raw and SmackDown. And I bring that up because, especially on SmackDown, I thought they were surprising in a very, very good way, right? You had Io Sky and Jey Uso both advancing on Raw, which Jey Uso still a favorite to win the men's. Io Sky beating Kiana James and Zelina Vega, but those are two big names to be in. But on SmackDown, on the women's side, you had Michin, Bianca Belair, and Chelsea Green in a triple threat Money in the Bank qualifier. And Chelsea Green won the qualifier. Now, I think Chelsea Green would be a great briefcase holder. Tiffany Stratton is probably still my pick, but I mean, the fact that she won and we're getting her in that in that Money in the Bank match, already a major win. And isn't she Canadian? She gets to do it in Canada. That's fun. And then on the men's side, so you had Jey Uso. Then you do Tama Tonga, Randy Orton, and Carmelo Hayes. Not only does Carmelo Hayes win, but he pinned Randy Orton. This is how, look, I mean, Carmelo Hayes hasn't been a part of any huge stories yet, but night one coming out and getting the main event match with Cody Rhodes, and now a couple months later getting a pin over Randy Orton, and he's going to get to be in the Money in the Bank match. And Carmelo Hayes is one of those names that I would not be surprised to see him win. You know, there's two things that you do in a Money in the Bank match. Two people win Money in the Bank ladder matches. One, somebody who the fans are dying to see become the world champion, and you just don't know how they'll get there, and they get a briefcase. Or two, somebody that you would say, yeah, there's no way that he's going to be world champion anytime soon, and then he gets a briefcase. CM Punk, when he first got the briefcase, was like, no, he's not ready to be champion, and he won it. Same thing with Daniel Bryan. No, he's not going to win the world title. He won the briefcase. He won the title. Other guys, it's like, I don't know what their road is. Oh, boy, they have the briefcase. Like Big E. People were ready for him to be champion, just didn't know how he would get there. The briefcase was how he got there. I would put Jey Uso in the Big E column, but I would put Carmelo Hayes in that CM Punk column. So, and then Andrade is in it too. You did Grayson Waller, Kevin Owens, and Andrade. And you had Andrade win the thing. So, you know, I feel like that's a good... What do we have next week? I think LA Knight is looking to qualify. Logan Paul is looking to qualify. It's going to be good, but it's getting very, very interesting. I still think a cash-in is built for Jey Uso, but Carmelo Hayes holding the briefcase would add a lot to his character. I just think... Here's the thing. I think especially in this era where everything counts and payoffs are the new norm, which they weren't always, you've got to commit to the people who win these briefcases have to win titles. And not the United States title, not the Intercontinental title. The people who win these briefcases have to win world titles. So I think if Carmelo Hayes wins, he absolutely has to become the world heavyweight champion. Or he could, that means going over to Raw and everything, which I think would be fine. He could win the WWE Undisputed Championship. That'd be a big belt for Carmelo Hayes to win right now. But, yeah, even if he only holds it for a couple of months, I think if Carmelo Hayes wins that briefcase and you put that title on him, it re-solidifies that Money in the Bank ladder match, especially in this era, is this, oh my God. Because you had Damian Priest, who wasn't necessarily in the conversation for world champion, winning the briefcase, he wins the title. Now, the same thing with Carmelo Hayes. If you put the title on him, now it's like the stakes have just been brought way back up. Because back in the day, when it was like 100% success rate, the stakes for this Money in the Bank ladder match were through the roof. But every time a failed cash-in attempt happens, or it's not for the world title, the stakes in the briefcase match are diminished. Every time a successful cash-in happens and it's for a world title, the stakes go up. I say keep moving the stakes up. And Carmelo Hayes moves those stakes up more than just about anybody that I can think of. And before we move on to emails, I might need a drink of water. His throat is going. Before we move on to emails, we haven't even spoke about Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio. I mean, my God, Liv Morgan, even on social, bringing in the spirit of Haktua Girl, which I don't even want to describe for all of our viewers because it's a little distasteful. But she did it on social media. I don't know if you saw it. She is driving people insane. The cowhide vest coming into play on Monday Night Raw. How'd Liv get the vest? Damian Priest walking in. Look, Damian Priest walking in on Liv Morgan, unzipping the vest of Dominic unzipping Liv Morgan's vest. The visual was too good. But at some point, the Judgment Day are just going to have to stay out of my man's business. At some point, the Judgment Day are just going to have to let Dominic live. And understand that they're dealing with a true Casanova in Dominic Mysterio. And there's no getting around that. I think the payoff for this is going to be big. I can't wait. I love every week watching this story just unfold and unfold and unfold. It's so much fun. Yeah. And it makes you wonder what they're going to... They've done the vest. They've done the hotel key. And when are we going to get a payoff to Finn Balor being in that hotel room? Or not being in the hotel room? Are we going to get an answer to that? I think we will eventually. So what could happen is So like I said, I think Rhea and Damian Priest are going to end up on one side of the equation. And this is not faction warfare. I think it's the end of the Judgment Day is Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley on one side of the equation. And Dominic, JD, and Finn Balor on the other side of the equation. However, that could continue to disintegrate if Dominic Mysterio finds out that Finn Balor was doing anything inappropriate with Liv Morgan, right? It could continue to untangle and untangle and untangle, or tangle and tangle and tangle, depending on how you're looking at it. But ultimately, I think that the first rivalry that I've got after SummerSlam, after Damian Priest loses the title, is Finn Balor coming after Damian Priest. And Finn Balor, kind of escalating. And I think that will bring it so that Damian Priest is really solidified as that top-tier babyface, and it will rise Finn Balor up to kind of a top-tier heel. And while you've got a villain as the champion, Damian Priest, you don't need Damian Priest to lose to Gunther more than once. So in the meantime, Finn Balor is not going to go after Gunther because he'll be a villain. So raise Finn Balor's stock by having him, in matches with Damian Priest. That's probably where I would go. I'm interested in hearing where you would go because we still have time for emails. Yes, if you'd like to email in, notsamwrestling@gmail.com is our email address. Now, I do want to let you know that we will be live in Cleveland, Ohio. SummerSlam weekend. If you haven't gotten tickets yet and you're going to be in Cleveland, the Thursday before SummerSlam, I believe that's August 1st, we will be live in Cleveland with guests. The whole Not Sam Wrestling live podcast operation is coming to Hilarities in Cleveland, Ohio. You can get tickets now. There's a link at notsam.com. So please be there and wear something special. I've been getting requests for people who might have missed last year's drop or last season's drop or whenever it was. We will be reopening the Not Sam Wrestling store. Very, very soon, we'll have brand new merch dropping for the summer. It's in the design phase right now. As always, we're going to do it pre-order style. So the store will be open for probably 2 weeks. I'll open it up. The new items will be there. You'll have your opportunity to grab them. And then I shut the store once more. So once they go up, get them while you can. I will update you on our email list, which you can get on my link tree or on notsam.com, I believe. Or here on the podcast if you're listening closely. Let's get into these emails. NotSamWrestling@gmail.com. NotSamWrestling@gmail.com is our email address. We go to Davey. Happy Monday to you, sir, and a happy Monday to you. My question this week pertains to the neutral standing in wrestling. This meaning that they are not face nor heel, but right on the fence. For example, Rhea Drew playing the role of a heel but still showing face-like qualities. Seeing Drew high-five fans, then spit fire on the mic makes me believe that he sits on the fence. Does neutral exist to wrestling analysis, or is this not an actual thing? Always appreciative, Davey. So tweener does exist. You can kind of be a tweener or a floater. It's tough to do that successfully. What I think exists more, especially in this era, are people in transition. That the going from heel to babyface, either you go Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty, where there's one moment, one action that you do, and it officially turns you, or over time you turn. There are also heels that appreciate, like Drew McIntyre, again, going back to 1997, Bret Hart, is a heel only to fans that don't like him. He thinks he's speaking honestly. So if you support him, he doesn't want you to boo him, So it makes sense, but he's still a heel. You can cheer him, but he's still a heel. Who's the other person? Rhea Ripley. Again, I think this is a person who's a heel, or was a heel, and there wasn't any specific moment that she turned, but the fans made it impossible. Like Rhea Ripley is a babyface. There's no getting around that. So I don't think of those people as neutral. I just think they have unique circumstances that still make them heels. That's the other thing. The babyface heel thing, you can't have this rigid set of laws. You have to really just kind of look at the character. When I analyze wrestling characters, I go, are they a babyface or a heel? Like, you know, the Joker has a whole gang of people. They all support him. Still a heel. Sometimes Batman has everybody in Gotham hating him. Still a babyface. Austin writes in, Sam, who do you think has been the biggest hater in Dom's life? Okay, I love this question. This is what I've been waiting for. This is the type of analysis that I really want to dive into. The biggest hater in Dom's life, Finn Balor for trying to keep him away from Liv, or his father, Ray, for trying to keep him away from Rhea. Let's face it, Dom is a ladies' man. Just let him live his best life. Okay, I'll get to your second question because I love this first question. I think that the members of the Judgment Day are bigger haters than his father, Rey Mysterio, because his father, Rey Mysterio, was like, stay away from Rhea Ripley. He was like, no. And then his father was like, okay, then do what you're going to do, but I don't want any part of it. The Judgment Day won't stop. They won't be like, okay, do your thing, but I don't want any part of it. They keep getting involved. Dominic, get away from her. Yeah, and then they're going up to Liv and saying, get away from Dominic. I say Finn Balor and Damian Priest, confirmed, bigger haters than Rey Mysterio. Great question. Second question. What's up with WWE murdering everyone recently? From Braun Breaker killing Ricochet to the Wyatt Massacre to Drew and Punk. Seems to me like HR might have to step up and show their workers some videos on compassion and kindness. Look, I think that right now, opportunity is open for anybody in the WWE. And the people that realize it are taking full advantage of it. And they should. You know, that's the way it should work in wrestling. Brett writes in. Brett from Cincinnati. I hope you're coming out to Cleveland. As I take a swig. Brett writes in. One of my favorite things about listening to the podcast is how many of your listeners are relatively new fans. Out of curiosity, what are your go-to matches from the history of wrestling to recommend to new fans? Okay. So, a relatively new fan asked me to send them a list of matches to watch when they had some free time. And I'm not going to put this person on blast, but these are the matches that I told. This is such a great question because I literally sent this list to them today. This is the list. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These 8 matches. I said, start here. Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio from Halloween Havoc 1997. John Cena versus CM Punk, Money in the Bank 2011. Daniel Bryan versus Randy Orton versus Batista, WrestleMania 30. Sasha Banks versus Bayley, NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 1. Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect, SummerSlam 91. Rob Van Dam versus John Cena, ECW One Night Stand 2006. Steve Austin versus The Rock, WrestleMania 17. And The Rock versus Hollywood Hogan, WrestleMania 18. That's the list that I sent to a new fan just this week. So those, I'm going to save that list. That would be a go-to. But that's a great question, man. Because I do love hearing from new fans all the time. Sarah writes in, thank you for all the emergency podcasts this week. Emergency podcast and an extra large standard podcast. My God, what a giver, huh? They are so awesome, and I loved them all. Thank you. With that said, how do you think Chad Gable returns on Monday, since we saw WWE Twitter with Adam Pearce announcing he's still in the qualifying match, but was clearly taken over by the Wyatt Six? Speculating wildly here, do you think they go after Adam Pearce next based on what we saw? What are your thoughts on this and what we saw? So I think it's important. He wasn't taken over by the Wyatt Six. He was attacked by the Wyatt Six. They didn't curse him. They beat him into oblivion. Very important to differentiate that. I think he comes back shaken up, beaten up, but good to go. It'll be interesting to hear his perspective on what happened to him. I wouldn't be surprised if he blacked out. That might be the direction that I would go in, just to keep mystery alive as this thing is still relatively new. And yeah, I think Adam Pearce is in a huge amount of trouble. I think he's in a tremendous amount of trouble. I think it's not even funny how bad things are for Adam Pearce right now. Good morning, Sam. Mark from Scotland here. Appreciate that, Mark. Love hearing from people all over the world. I I like your plan for Cody slowly turning evil. And maybe that's because I literally just started watching The Boys, but I like it too. Are there examples of previous wrestlers making such a dramatic change from babyface to heel during a title reign? I'm sure there must be, but I can't think of any. I don't think Roman counts. Okay, during a title reign. Well, not like this that I can think of. Because, I mean, you could argue Shawn Michaels. You could argue Shawn. You could say, yeah. Let's see. When did Shawn... Well, no, actually you couldn't. Because Shawn won the title from Bret at Survivor Series, so you couldn't. Shawn turned kind of heelish after he had lost the title. Good question. I don't think during a title run. If I have, email in, or leave it in the comments on YouTube, because there might be, and I'm just not thinking of any. Also, 2 more if you've got time. Is it demeaning to have Liv's entire reign be a sexy game with the Judgment Day members just to keep Rhea in our minds? It feels very 2000s diva-ish, and she doesn't wrestle at all. I'm glad you asked that, because it absolutely does not. No. And I think that people who are saying this is demeaning or comes across as very 2000s-ish aren't really analyzing what they're watching. Liv Morgan is empowered by what she has. Liv Morgan is completely dictating this story. Liv Morgan is not being a sexual object. If anything, Liv Morgan is objectifying Dominic. Liv Morgan is objectifying the people around her. Liv Morgan is using everything that she has to get ahead for Liv Morgan. If you look at this scenario, there is no question as to who has the power here. Liv Morgan has every bit of the power. That's the difference between what we're watching now and what we watched in the 2000s. In this scenario, Liv Morgan is leading the charge. And there are people telling her, don't do this. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. So, yeah, no, I think that this is far more empowering than anything that you're comparing it to. And on a similar note, as happy as I am for female mid-card title in NXT and your new openness to one on the mid-card, do we need to call it a women's version of a man's title? The TBS title works as a standalone for AEW. Should WWE try something like that? No, again, I think you're just searching. Like, there's a women's world championship. There's a men's world championship. There's 2 different divisions. So it's not like men can't compete for the TBS championship. So what difference does it make? If they were on a different network, it's basically the TNT championship and the TBS championship is the men's network championship and the women's network championship. So no, I mean, if you've got 2 separate divisions, I think that you can create equivalent titles. I think there's no reason to try to find problems. Hari writes in, hope you're doing good. I'm doing great. It's only been a few weeks since I've started watching your podcast and wanted to say you are the best. You're very perceptive, dude. You figured that out in only a few weeks. It takes a lot of people a lot longer to figure out how great I am. But as it was declared last week, I'm the GOAT. I appreciate that. Apart from the wrestling aspect, I love how much you emphasize on the storylines, characters, and all those things. I do too. I like that I do that. It has only been more than a year since I've really been into professional wrestling. I used to watch it back when I was a kid, and it was the Shield era. And being a kid, I didn't know how this actually works. All right, look, dude, I don't need your autobiography. I appreciate the compliments. I have a question for you. What a dick. Me being a person who watches the show for storylines, characters, moments, emotions, more than pure wrestling part, I'd like to ask you how you would book the Bloodline story roughly from this point to the point where it could finally culminate with The Rock versus Roman. I'm not going to do a whole podcast for you. We'll get there. But I appreciate the email, buddy. Nick writes in, Happy late Father's Day to the GOAT. I appreciate that. Who do you think could potentially benefit the most from the women's Money in the Bank? I think it going between. I personally think it's going between Chelsea and Tiffy if Tiffy qualifies. I think Tiffy has the most upside, but fans were going crazy for Chelsea in Chicago. It's time to pull the trigger on Chelsea Green. I think Tiffy. I don't know. I think Chelsea Green is one of those that once she has the title, like Chelsea's whole character is that she's not getting treated fairly and is demanding for things. So once she's got the title, what's there to demand for? I think Chelsea losing in a way that she feels is unfair, but is not actually unfair, and Tiffany eventually winning is probably the way I would go. But a good question. And I'm not against Chelsea winning. I love Chelsea Green. Samuel writes in, Sam to Sam. After an awesome week of WWE, what are you most excited for? I'm just excited to be alive, dude. I'm excited to wake up every morning. Also, maybe this Wednesday we finally get behind the curtain. I don't know. I don't know when that's coming. Louise writes in, or Louise, I don't know. Currently, there are 2 Samoans and 2 Tongans compromising the active bloodline. Hikuleo may be coming. Then maybe another Samoan. Speculating wildly. Is it possible that the bloodline feud will be internal between these 2 groups? Tama Tonga and Tongaloa didn't look too thrilled with the arrival of Jacon Fatu. Maybe Roman, Jimmy, and Jay throw in to take the bloodline back. Or there's a 3-way struggle for control. I absolutely love this stuff. No, I don't think that the Tongans, because I don't think that the fans would be as behind the Tongans because it would feel too much like a stretch. I don't. I think that eventually maybe the Tongans leave the bloodline and start their own thing long term. I think that that's possible. And Solo Sikoa is out of luck. Maybe Jacob Fatu. I think that they could all separate and the Tongans could remain a unit. But no, I think in the meantime, we don't separate by 3. But it's possible. There's so many moving parts now. It's not a bad question. Gran writes in, I'm betting my ass on Chad Gable winning Money in the Bank with the help of the Creed brothers. Yes, I'm calling it now, even though he has yet to qualify. And man, how great would it be if he cashed in on Gunther in front of his family in Berlin? If that show was later down the line, it would be 100% the way to go. No. Why would the Wyatt Sick6 allow Chad Gable to qualify or cash in? I think Chad Gable's got way too many enemies. What? I don't understand what. I mean, Chad Gable has literally made enemies out of everybody in the Alpha Academy and also the Wyatt Sick6. And you think he's going to win the Money in the Bank and beat Gunther? All right. I guess we're watching the same show, I guess. I don't know. Sal writes in, is it weird that Omos and MVP are still a tandem and neither have been used on TV in the last year? Apart from the Royal Rumble or Battle Royals, Omos' last singles match was against Seth Rollins at last year's Backlash. Who else do you think has been underutilized? Well, I don't know that anybody's been underutilized to that extent. I don't think it's weird that, neither one of them have been on TV, so it's not weird that they're still a tandem, even though they haven't been on TV. I think it makes more sense that they're a tandem because neither one of them has been on TV. Yeah, I think the idea is that Almost is being saved for special occasions, but I do think it is time that they do something special because I think Almost is something special. And I'm missing MVP. I'd like to see them both back on TV. Caden writes in, with all this bloodline stuff going on, Sam, how do you think Roman is going to be able to fight back with Solo having him outnumbered and with the soon arrival of Hikuleo, or should I say Talatonga? No, you shouldn't say that because that's dirty dirt sheet rumors. We think Hikuleo might be coming. He could be called Talatonga, but that scenario hasn't been presented to us. How do you think the reformed Usos and Roman are going to fight off the bloodline? I personally think that Roman will try to recruit the final boss. And he does, but the final boss will eventually turn on him and align with Solo. Look, everybody's bringing up The Rock being added into this bloodline scenario when we haven't gotten finality on the Cody Rhodes thing. The Rock left and said he was coming for Cody. The Rock gave Cody something, and we didn't know what it was. Cody versus The Rock still has to happen. I think that as it stands, you got a 4-member bloodline. Solo, Jacob, and the Tongans. If you keep it at 4, you've got Solo, Jacob, and the Tongans versus Roman, the Usos, and Sami Zayn. So you're saying if you add Hikuleo and they add The Rock, it feels lopsided if you do that. I don't know. But I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I'm trying to call it as it lies. I'm trying to run this play as it's happening in front of us. So the idea of adding more elements when everything that we know just changed literally on Friday is like, let's not put the cart before the horse here, okay? Another Sam, this one from Salt Lake City. What's the haps? I've gotten back into watching the product religiously in the past couple of years, and you always help bring a new perspective on storylines. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you, Sam. I wanted to run this idea I had for the end of the Dom, Rhea, Liv triangle past you. I think the custody for Dom match is a no-brainer, but I think it'd be cool if hanging above the ring is custody papers. Let's move on to the next email. All right, I'm hungry, I'm tired, and I work with children. Arlie writes in, "Hi, Sam. I was prepared to write an email saying Paul Heyman promos were losing a bit of credibility because so far the Tongans have not really shown any dangerous moments since the attack on Jimmy. They seem like your average sidekicks, usually losing the upper hand to KO and Orton, and then Jacob Mother effing Fatu showed up and destroyed everyone within 5 minutes, instantly giving credence to Paul's warnings. If the rule let them cook was a segment, Friday's main event would be it. Also, was it just me or did the Tongans look concerned right before they stood with Solo and Jacob? Everything counts. Yes, yes, and yes. Let them cook, dude. You have to let this stuff cook. You have to. I understand, but you have to." Last email, because it's been a long podcast, and I want to, you guys got other stuff to do. Steve-O writes in, "Sam, long-time show, first-time emailer. It's 8 a.m. in the Midwest, and I'm currently taking in everything that's happened in the last 12 hours. Just finished up the emergency podcast as well. By the way, all these emails that I just read were sent over the weekend. So I'm sorry. We get a lot of emails now. Please email in all the time. I love the emails. But, I mean, yeah, it is a long podcast today. And I can't help but wonder where we are going with Drew and Punk and how we get to SummerSlam. As the best booker in the business, you may have already planned this out, but here we go. Now that Punk has been shelved even longer by Drew could make the jump to TNA. Absolutely not. And find himself in the 6-man elimination match for the TNA title at Slammiversary. We get down to Moose and Drew, and some sort of chicanery ensues. And we hear Cult of Personality echo in the arena. Punk comes down and low blows Drew just as he did at Clash, costing him the title. Monday Night Raw comes around, and CM Punk announces he's cleared to wrestle and challenges Drew to a match at SummerSlam. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this and how you'd book." Dude, I understand it'd be cool, and doing stuff in other promotions is cool. God bless TNA. But if you've already lost the WWE title in your hometown, and that's all the way up here, losing the TNA title at Slammiversary when you're not even a TNA wrestler does not compare. TNA and NXT have their thing going on, and it's cool for both. But the idea of how do we elevate Punk and Drew even more? Have Drew lose at Slammiversary? Come on, dude. I know it's early in the Midwest, but come on, dude. No. I mean, how do we get to SummerSlam? I mean, it's easy. Drew on Raw brags about it. That's a week done. We get past Money in the Bank. Maybe Drew has a match, or he doesn't. CM Punk comes out on the Monday after Money in the Bank and said, "Drew, not only did you not kill me, you didn't even injure me. I'm cleared." It's like, what? It's like 2 weeks until Money in the Bank. Don't worry about Slammiversary. Like, Punk's off TV for a week or two, and then he comes back and says he's cleared. And now we go to SummerSlam. That's it. I mean, WWE's done all the heavy lifting. You don't have to go crazy fantasy booking this. It's going to be the biggest match ever. It's going to be awesome. you guys have been awesome. This show's been awesome. I appreciate you hanging out. Hopefully you hung out this whole entire time. And if so, if you are one that has watched or listened to us for the last 2 full hours, let me know. Leave a comment. Leave something in the Spotify Q&A, on the review for Apple, whatever you want to do. If you listen to this whole thing, I really, really appreciate it. This is so fun for me. I hope it's fun for you as well. It's a great time to be a fan. It's a great time to host a podcast. And it's a great time to be doing Notsam Wrestling. I can't wait to get some new merch out for you guys. I can't wait to see you guys in Cleveland. Talk soon. Have a good one, everybody.